Models can be a pain to work with, but they don't have to be. In this video, I'll teach you how to use Vue Teleport to create custom reusable models that will make your life a whole lot easier. The Teleport component is a cool new feature in Vue 3. It lets us render components anywhere on the page, even if they're buried deep in the DOM. This is useful when we want to put elements like modals, pop-ups and notifications on top of our app. It's easier to handle them if they're rendered outside of the Vue app. This is because managing events and styles like position and z-index can be difficult if the modal or pop-up has many parents to account for. I'll be using Vite to create my Vue app, and I'll also use the Vue.js template. I'll also be using Tailwind for styling the model. Let's start by creating model confirm.vue in the components folder. Here we will have a div for a background and also a white dialog box with a headline and two buttons. The buttons will emit a close event, which we will handle in app.vue. Now in app.vue, let's import model confirm. Let's add the model to our template and also add a button for opening it. Back in our script, let's create a variable called show, as well as two functions that will make show true or false. Back in our template, let's add an v-if to our model and display it only when show is true. Let's also listen for the close event and trigger the close function to hide the model. Lastly, let's add a non-click event to our other button, which will similarly trigger the open function and show the model. Now it should look like this. Now that we have our model, let's try to break it. Let's add a new div below our model and position it absolute. Now, as the name implies, this div will make things ugly. Let's open the model and see. The new div is now interfering with our model. Let's also have a look at the DOM. As you can see, the model is rendered on the same level as our make things ugly element. It would be much better if it could be rendered in another place, right? Let's add Vue Teleport now. Let's go to index.html. This div here is where our Vue app is mounted. Let's create a new div with an ID of model and just below it. Our model will be rendered inside this div. Back in app.vue, let's wrap our model using the built-in teleport component. Teleport needs us to specify a prop2 and it accepts a CSS selector. So in our case, that would be #model. If we now test it and open our model, the problem should be fixed. And if we inspect the DOM, we should see that the model is rendered outside our Vue app. Next step, let's make it even better. Notice how we have this code here. It would be better if we create a composable to create the logic necessary to display our model. This is a great way to make our code reusable. Let's create a composables folder and create a file use modal.js. In this composable, we will keep a track of a variable show and a variable component, in case we want to display different models. Lastly, there are two methods for showing and hiding the model. Back in app.vue, we can delete the show, open and close logic. Let's import our composable and let's initialize it. We create a function that will assign the component in our composable to be the model confirm component. We do this using the mark row helper. After that, we call the show model method. In the template, we replace the logic to use the new model composable. If we test it now, it should still work the same, but our logic will be extracted into this composable and will be ready to be reused. Okay, so now we have our model confirm component, but what if we have more than one model? Maybe we want to display dynamically different models based on our use case. Remember we added component in our use model composable? We can use this together with Vue's dynamic component feature to display different models. Let's start by creating our second model, model overview. It will be almost the same as model confirm, however, now we have a list of items and only one button. Back in app.vue, let's import our new component. Let's also create a new method which will set the component value to the model overview and open it. The most important part is we use component is, which is a dynamic Vue component. The is prop accepts either the name of the component we want to render or the component itself. In our case, we set it to use the component from our use model composable. Lastly, we add a button for opening the second model, and now we should be able to have different models with the same logic. Lastly, on our task list is to add a transition so that the model appears nicely animated on the screen. We can use yet another Vue 3 component called transition. In app.vue, let's wrap our component with the transition element. Finally, we need to animate the enter and leave states. So let's add the following styles, and now once we open a model, it should have a nice transition. During this tutorial, we managed to learn more about the Vue Teleport component as well as the Vue Transition component. We used best practices to manage to extract some of our logic into a composable. Lastly, we also learned about Vue dynamic components, enabling us to render multiple types of models. If you want to learn more about Vue and the Vue ecosystem, make sure to follow me on my socials. I create Vue content every week and I'm slowly starting to gain traction, so I'd really appreciate your help. Thank you and goodbye.